Welcome back, everyone, to the Kickstarter Weekly for October 3rd through the 9th. If this is your first time here, then welcome. In these videos, I profile the campaigns that I think look the best that will be completing their funding in the next week. I also usually at the top talk about games that I've played since the last video, but I was on a trip to the East Coast, traveling, visiting family. I was hoping to be able to have some time to teach my father how to play Watergate. He's a big history buff, retired lawyer, so I thought he would really like the game, but we just didn't have time to get to it. So I actually have no played games this video. So when I start, we'll just be proceeding directly to the 4 campaigns I have for you today. And then after I talk about the currently running campaigns, I usually talk about any campaigns that I personally pledged from the last video, followed by any games that I acquired. Now, in this period, because my last video was a double video and I featured 16 campaigns, I actually backed 5 of those. So I will be mentioning those at the end of the video, and then after that, I will quickly be talking about the games that arrived in. I think there are 5 of those as well. It seems like there's been a big backlog of games because of what's happening with global shipping, and there just was a bit of an uncorking, I think, where all the games are now showing up all at once. Thank you very much for watching. If any of the campaigns that I'm talking about specifically interest you, you can go down to the description section, click on the link. It'll take you right over to the campaign. You can peruse the campaign a little bit more, decide if it's something for you, and if you want, you can back it. Finally, please consider liking and subscribing if you like what you see and you want more content like this in the future. And I also am working towards a new studio space upstairs, and once I do, I'll be producing more teach and review videos again, and I'm also going to be launching a Twitch channel, hopefully by the end of the year, and doing a lot of live streaming, both of campaign type games, storytelling, dungeon crawlers, some solo stuff, and Euros, heavy Euros, as well as some lighter Euros. All of that said, let's get started on our first campaign for this video. It's for a game called Mushroom Sorcerer that's going to complete its funding on Monday, October the 3rd. This game had a minimum required funding goal of $13,000. They're currently at $37,000, which is just a little bit less than a 3 times multiplier. Mushroom Sorcerer is a game for 1 to 4 players. It plays in about 45 to 90 minutes. The complexity in the game appears to be medium light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at high because this is a new publisher and they're doing Kickstarter for the first time, I believe. Now, Mushroom Sorcerer has a grab bag of mechanics. You're going to be creating potions, using resources to do that, but you'll also then be claiming tile space on a main board where the kind of controlling mechanic there is area majority. This is from a first-time designer named Man Chi. The art is by Roxy Dye, and she has previously worked on Age of Galaxy and Ela and Something Shiny. And the game is being published by Headblown Studio, and again, this is their first published game and their first Kickstarter, which is why the risk is a little higher on this one. There are some unknown factors with a newer publishing entity doing it for the first time. Now, the campaign and the pledges that you can pledge for are fairly simple, and that seems to be the case for all of our 4 campaigns today. There are 2 pledges for this one. So for $62, you can pledge at the Apprentice level. That's going to get you the core game, any Kickstarter exclusives, and stretch goals. For $82, you can pledge at the Master level. That's going to throw in an expansion called Horus and the Echo of the Wind, which is basically an additional faction for you to play. Because the game has multiple factions, they have variable abilities. Now, if you're an early bird backer, meaning if you pledged within the first 72 hours, so that's gone at this point, but if you did that, you would be getting for free a 2-unit dice tower. They have these little resource trays in the game. They can be stacked and made into a dice tower, so you can use them either way. You can also purchase that as an add-on if you weren't around to get it as a freebie during the first 72 hours, and it is $15 as an add-on. They also, for $25, have a 4-unit dice tower, so it stacks up 4 units high, and you can also disassemble that dice tower and use those units individually as resource bowls. For $8, you can add on a cool enamel pin. For $32, you can add on a separate game that's pre-existed called Billionaire Sergeant. And for $41, you can add on the bundle of Billionaire Sergeant plus Billionaire Sergeant 1974. Shipping in the continental United States is either $20 or $25, depending on which pledge level you're pledging for. And if you're adding on either the Billionaire game or the Billionaire bundle, that will increase your shipping by $8. Finally, Headblown Studio is planning on delivering Mushroom Sorcerer in April of 2023. Our second campaign of the week is for a game called Spark Riders 3000. All of the games this week are on Kickstarter, by the way, so there's nothing on GameFound or BackerKit. Now, this one had a minimum required funding goal of $39,000. They're currently at $83,000, which is over 2 times that minimum required funding goal. Spark Riders 3000 is going to complete its funding on Tuesday, October the 4th. This is a game for 1 to 4 players, plays in about 45 to 90 minutes. Complexity in the game appears to be medium light, and again, we're going to set the risk on this one at high. Spark Riders 3000 is a cooperative tower defense game that primarily features dice rolling and some cool little miniatures. A lot of new creatives on this one. So the designer is named Maxime Gallet, and there are 3 artists, Logan Chai, Guillaume Lucbert, and Raphael Minette. And finally, the game is being produced by Arcada Studio, which has previously produced a game called Irune. There are 3 different pledge levels for this campaign. For $39, you can pledge at the Rider level. That's going to get you the core game, any Kickstarter exclusives, and stretch goals. For $79, you can pledge at the Commander level, which is going to add in the Prosperity box, and we'll talk about that as an add-on in just a moment. And finally, for $108, you can pledge at the General level. That's going to add on, well, the Prosperity box as well. You're still going to get that, but it's then going to add on a playmat and a dice tray. Now, if you'd like to choose your extras, you can do that through add-ons. For $28, you can add on the playmat. For $15, you can add on the dice tray. For $10, you can add on extra dice, a set of 14. And for $20, you can add on the Prosperity box. Now that's going to come with 2 new playable characters and their miniatures and some extra cards. In the continental US, depending on what level you pledge at, which of those 3 pledge levels, your estimated shipping is going to be either $16.50, $19 or $22. And finally, Arcada Studio is planning to deliver Spark Riders 3000 to backers in November of 2023. So, a year off. From there, we go to Atlas Lost, Rise of the New Sovereigns. This one had a minimum required funding goal of $10,000. They're currently at $157,000, which is a 15 times multiplier. Atlas Lost is going to complete its funding on Wednesday, October the 5th. It's a game for 2 to 4 players with a playtime of 60 to 90 minutes. Complexity in the game is medium heavy, and again, we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at high. Atlas Lost is a civilization game. It involves resource management and tech trees. It's got a very specific kind of graphic design to it that I like. I think it's very appealing. And there's also an expansion add-on that gives you campaign play, which is always something that I'm very interested in. Atlas Lost is designed by Totsuka Chuo, who's previously designed the Arctic, Aqua Garden, and Perfumery, and there are 2 artists on the project. Kazuma Koda hasn't done board games before, but you probably know their work from video games where they were a concept artist for the Nier Automata series. And Yota Suzuki, who previously worked on Perfumery and a game called The Tree-Lined Avenue. Tactical Games, the publisher, also previously produced Perfumery and The Tree-Lined Avenue. Again, a very simple campaign with not too many choices in terms of pledge levels. For $63, you can get the standard version of the game. And for $87, you can pledge at the complete pledge level. That's going to add on that expansion called The Lost Nation, which is going to give you 4 new modules that you can work into the game and 3 campaigns. I believe the campaigns are going to kind of alternate the different modules that you use in the game to give you different experiences playing the game with different combinations of modules, but also give you a story through line for those series of games. You'll actually get 3 different campaigns that you can play in that expansion. In the continental US, shipping has been estimated at either $16 or $26, depending on which of the 2 pledge levels that you're pledging. And finally, Tactical Games is planning on delivering Atlas Lost in September of 2023. That brings us to our final campaign for the week. It's called Naturopolis. This game had a minimum required funding goal of $2,000. They're currently at $80,000, which is a 40 times multiplier. It's huge. And most games can't do that. The only reason that that's possible with this one is because the minimum required funding goal is so small. And the reason that it's so small is that Button Shy, the publisher, their bread and butter are these 18 card games that fit into a wallet. And so sometimes they'll produce expansions. Usually if they do that, there might be 2 or 3 6-card expansions. They'll package them together. That's another wallet. So it doesn't take them a lot to produce these games. They're simple, they're light, but some of them are really, really good. This campaign is going to complete its funding on Saturday, October the 8th. It's a game for 1 to 4 players, although I usually hear people talking about playing Sprawlopolis mostly as a solo game, but it can be played up to 4 players. Plays in about 15 to 20 minutes. Complexity on the game is light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium-low. Now, I would set it at low. The only reason that I don't set Button Shy campaigns at low is because it's basically a one-man operation, Jason Tagmeyer. And he's always doing a phenomenal job, but he is one person working out of an apartment in Brooklyn. So if something were to happen to him, the whole show ends. And that's the only reason that I keep Button Shy at a medium-low level instead of promoting them to low, just because everything hinges on one person. It's a one-man operation. They employ different designers and artists, but in terms of the publisher and all the work of the publisher, he's one guy kind of putting these packages together with his friends. Now, this game is sort of a spin-off of Sprawlopolis. That is a card game, a tile placement game. I own it. I think it's pretty good. I don't know if I'm going to be keeping it. It's just a little bit light for my taste, but it is a good game and it has good choices. And I think if you want a small game that you can kind of carry around and pull out and still have legitimate choices that you can make, Sprawlopolis is a very good game. There are also a lot of little expansions for Sprawlopolis, and they've created some additional games in the Sprawlopolis line, like Agropolis, that can be played standalone or integrated with Sprawlopolis. So this is kind of another game in that series. This one's called Naturopolis. Now, there are 3 designers on Naturopolis. They are the same 3 designers that have been consistent through all of the other games, Sprawlopolis and Agropolis. They include Stephen Aramini, who's previously worked on Agropolis, Circle the Wagons, and Sprawlopolis, and Danny Devine and Paul Kluka, and both of them have worked on those same 3 games. So for all 3 designers, those are their 3 highest rated games over at Board Game Geek. Danny Devine also did the artwork on Naturopolis, and he's also done the artwork on Agropolis, Harvest Dice, and Sprawlopolis. And finally, the game is being published by Button Shy. They make these wonderful wallet card games. The games of theirs that are the highest rated on Board Game Geek are Circle the Wagons, Sprawlopolis, and Tussy Mussy. There are a few more pledge levels for this one because they want to give you the opportunity to get some of the other games in the series that can be integrated together. So the first pledge level is for $12. It's called Naturopolis. That will get you the new game, Naturopolis, and the expansions that they've created for it, Nessie, Points of Interest, and Ultimopolis. Now, Points of Interest is a specific expansion for Naturopolis, but they also have a Points of Interest mini expansion for all of the other games in the series as well. So you may be seeing in other places, they are different expansions. There's one for each iteration of the game. For $22, you can pledge Naturopolis and all the new stuff, and that's going to get you all of the Naturopolis stuff in the previous pledge, plus some other expansions that they've created just now for some of the other games that you can pledge and include in Naturopolis if you so choose. So they have newly produced Comopolis 2 and 3, which comes with an expansion collection wallet, and a new expansion for Sprawlopolis called Roadwork that will also come with an expansion collection wallet. So you'll be getting all of that stuff along with all of the things from the first pledge level in this $22 pledge level. Now, if you pledge at the $55 pledge level called Everything Sprawlopolis, Sprawlopolis was the first game in the series, so everything that came after it is kind of under that umbrella. So pledging at that level will also get you Sprawlopolis and the Sprawlopolis expansion collection, which is, I believe, 4 different expansions. 2 of them are, I think, 6-card expansions, and 2 of them are 1-card expansions. And you'll also get Agropolis and the expansions for Agropolis, which include the Agropolis specific points of interest, Invasion, and Seasons. And whatever pledge level you're pledging, in the continental US, your shipping is estimated at $5. And finally, Button Shy is planning on delivering Naturopolis in February of 2023. So that completes the 4 campaigns for this week and this week's video, but I've still got 2 sections left if you want to stick around. The first of those is the 5 games that I personally pledged from the 16 games that I profiled in the last video, which was 2 weeks ago. It was a double video since I was going out of town to the East Coast to visit family. The first of those campaigns is the Clinic Biohazard Deluxe expansion. Now, Clinic is a game that pre-existed, and then a few years ago they did a deluxe version with art by Ian O'Toole, who is probably my favorite board game artist. They then subsequently produced a bunch of expansions. They called them extensions. And you can still get them. They come in their own boxes. There's extension 1 through 5. And once Albin Viard finished those, he still had some ideas for a couple other things. One of them he did during the pandemic. It was a COVID kind of an expansion module, but it wasn't big enough to get its own extension. I passed on that at the time just because I didn't want to play something that was COVID themed. It was too soon, I guess, for me. But I do really like Clinic. There's also a campaign book that you can get that mixes up all of the many, many modules throughout all of the extensions. And there's so much gameplay in that campaign book, and the way that it mixes and matches all of these modules, it's wonderful. If you like Clinic, it just gives you so much game, so much unlimited game. And because I'm a completist, I still had that fact that I didn't get the COVID kind of mini expansion in the back of my mind. So Albin Viard came out with this campaign. It's for another very small modular expansion. It's called Biohazards, and it's going to give you this new mechanic that has to do with biohazard spills, and then the janitors in the game who are already in the game will then have to deal with that mechanic. So I figured I would get that, and it made sense for me at the time to also pick up that COVID expansion. So I already have the base game and all 5 extensions, so for me this is just a very small back to pick up these 2 remaining modules. Also, Albin Viard has said that with this final Biohazard little mini expansion module, he is done. He's not going to be producing anything more for Clinic, and it doesn't need it. I mean, there's so much game. This can keep you busy for, I want to say the rest of your life, but for a long time. There's a lot now in Clinic, so I think it's a good thing in time for him to move on to other games like Small City and Tramways. He can do more with those games or just work on something new. But this was a very small pledge for me, so it was easy for me to pledge. It wasn't a lot of cash. I also pledged Forsaken, which is being published by Game Trays, who do a lot of inserts for other games, resource trays, and also inserts in the box to help you store things. They've become very successful doing that. I think they've transformed the entire board game industry with the quality and relative affordability of their inserts and resource trays. So they're now getting into the publishing business. And Forsaken looks really cool. Of course, it's going to use their inserts in ways that I want to say other publishers haven't done before, but other publishers have gotten really creative and done really great things with game trays. And part of that may just be game trays themselves. They're very innovative in everything that they've done. And the system in this game is innovative as well, both in terms of the storage system and the way it's implemented in gameplay. And it's got kind of a very thematic storytelling element to it, and all of that spoke to me. So it was a pretty easy back for me, and I'm very excited to eventually get this game to the table and feature it on my channel. I also pledged The Fox Experiment, which is the latest game from Elizabeth Hargrave. I'm a huge fan of Wingspan. I think it's just a fantastic, amazing game that can appeal to all levels of gamers. I think there's stuff in there for heavier gamers to be satiated by, and it's not too difficult. It's a fairly easy teach. So it's a good, maybe not a gateway game, but maybe a next step game. And I think it's something that even people who don't play a lot of board games can get their head around. But either way, I think Wingspan is a fantastic, amazing game. She's also designed Mariposas, which I didn't love, and Tussie Mussie, which was a button shy game, which may not be my favorite. It's just a little too kind of small and light for my tastes. But I'm a huge fan of her design sensibility. And this new game, The Fox Experiment, has to do with genealogy and traits and pairing foxes together to try to get the traits that you want. Looks pretty cool. I'm very excited for it. I'm really excited for another Elizabeth Hargrave design that hopefully can be on the same level as a Wingspan. I also pledged Kinfire Chronicles Night's Fall, which was sort of a campaign game, I believe from Kevin Wilson, who's worked on the Arkham horror games. And I love big narrative storytelling games with really solid mechanics. This looked like a good one and something that I wanted to try out. And also feature on the channel, hopefully stream it on Twitch when it eventually arrives. The last thing that I pledged was Merchant's Cove. It is some new merchants, some new expansions for the Merchant's Cove game, which I already own. It's kind of a set collection game. We're trying to sell various resources, but there's a lot going on in terms of which Viking meeples you get to come off of the various ships, which stores they go to, and then every merchant plays differently. They all have different mechanics. It's kind of like Root in that sense, although Root is definitely much more complex, and it's more of a war game, sort of prettified and made cute to appeal to people who aren't only into very dry war games. I don't think that the variable player powers in Merchant's Cove are as complex as Root. This is more sort of a family-oriented game, an omni-gamer game. So it's something for everyone. It does have additional mechanics depending on which merchant you play. Those do need to be taught and or learned, but they're relatively easy to pick up, and it's fairly intuitive, and there are a lot of elements from merchant to merchant that do work the same way. So you're going to be dealing with the same kind of iconography. It's just the mechanics will be different from merchant to merchant. But it's a game that I really like, and this is kind of more variability, more stuff, and a bigger big box to go along with it. Finally, let's talk about the 5 games that have showed up in the last 2 weeks while I was gone and out of town. The first of those is D.E.I. Divide at Impera. This is a big miniatures game. It takes place in a post-apocalyptic frozen tundra. I believe there are some campaign elements to it if you want to play it that way. It's kind of Eurogamey and campaigny at the same time. And it is a competitive game. So I'm very much looking forward to that one. It's been a long time coming. They did a miniatures version for it and a meeples version, and the meeples were so cool. I think people would be very happy and very satisfied with either version, and they're both going to have a lot of table presence. I went with the miniatures version, but I'd be totally happy if I'd gotten the meeples version. Dom Pierre also arrived, which is another alcohol-making game. This one is focused on champagne. Now, I already own Viticulture and Venus Deluxe Edition, and I have Distilled, which is a beer-making game coming. I don't know if it's going to come this year. It'll either deliver this year or early next year. So I'll have to see how Dom Pierre compares to the other games that I have and whether I have room for all of those games, because they're thematically very close. But I was very impressed with Dom Pierre during its Kickstarter campaign. It looked very, very good, and it was something that I wanted to acquire and play. I also got my pledge for Etherfields, which is a giant Awakened Realms game, storytelling, heavy into the storytelling and theme. It's kind of like Tainted Grail. It was their game after Tainted Grail. I did Etherfields in one-wave shipping. So some people got Etherfields 1 or 2 years ago. I'm just getting everything now. So it was a huge delivery in a giant box, and I'm really looking forward to playing it. That's going to be another game I'll probably eventually feature on the Twitch channel once it gets launched. I also got Nightfall, which is a new game from Ryan Laucat's company, Red Raven Games. This one is a team-based game for 1 to 6 players. It's tower defense, so you're going to be playing in teams against one another, but there's also a campaign mode for 1 to 2 players, and that's my sweet spot. I love campaign modes, and it's something that I know I can play with Kristen, and very much looking forward to that. In general, I love everything that Ryan Laucat and Red Raven put out. Finally, Tindaya arrived, which is sort of like Spirit Island. I don't know too much about it now. It looked really good. I like cooperative games. I like heavy games, crunchy games. I don't think it's quite as crunchy as Spirit Island, which would be a hard feat to beat. But maybe it'll be sort of like a step into Spirit Island. I can play that with people first and then introduce them to Spirit Island. Thank you very much for spending some time with me and watching the video today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll be back in 1 week's time with another Kickstarter Weekly, looking at the campaigns that will be completing their funding in the following week. In the meantime, have a great week, play lots of great games. I'll be back in 1 week's time with a new video. I definitely will be talking about some games that I personally played in that video, and I'll see you all very soon. Take care. Bye.